What happened to the smartest person you went to school with? Story 1. He had aspirations to learn and spend his entire life learning. I thought he was going to go into engineering or science as he was a textbook introvert and loved reading books. As ridiculous as it sounds, I really thought he was going to change the world in some way. We spent our senior year working on physics projects together and studying calculus to prepare for college and graduated ready to take on life. Then came the cancer, acute myeloid leukemia. In a matter of a year, he was a physical shell of himself, but he was still good spirits. He never admitted to the pain, but it seemed like it was constant and agonizing. He passed away after 2 years of battling it. R.I.P. CB, you would have changed the world. I hope one day we can play one more round of Civilizations on the PC. Edit. Thank you all for the support. I lost my father around the same time, and it was just a difficult time all around for both families. Fortunately, I have been able to bond with his parents a lot and share a lot of memories together. Answer. I had a friend like this in high school, would always get 97/100 on math exams. Fortunately, he didn't die. Went to one of the top universities in London, went on to get his MBA, got a job at a bank working IT security, making a shoot ton of money. He is basically paid to think like a hacker, but to be one step ahead. It was fascinating the last time we met up, hearing him talk about his job that he obviously loves. Story 2. He's a super nerd at the PNW National Laboratory. He dropped out in 9th grade due to bullying, went to community college, went to veterinary school, and got a BS in animal science, got a MS in genetic cell biology, then went and got a MS in electrical engineering. Story 3. My husband is a PhD physicist. His old college friends are all PhD physicists, and all his coworkers have PhDs. I am absolutely drowning in brain cells that aren't mine. So when I met his boss, who, by the way, is literally one of the top experts in the world in his field, we were hosting a community event for homeschool kids and adults with special needs. I didn't know who he was yet, so I just made assumptions. I cheerfully guided him around like a guest who needed a little extra support, made sure he got cookies and cocoa, and even complimented him on his great grasp of the topic while giving him a tour of his own equipment. Then we ran into my husband, and I realized I had been gently supervising a world-class genius. The next day, his boss went out of his way to tell my husband how kind his wife is. He literally just thinks I'm wholesome. Answer. Reminds me of the time I was explaining the basics of air traffic control to a visitor at a virtual ATC event where some people take on the role of controllers while others fly the planes via simulators. The guy was nodding along without saying a word. After 15 minutes, he let me know that he is a real air traffic controller at the airport the event was held at. Story 4. Wanted to be a doctor, graduated undergrad with a 4.0, passed the MCAT with basically a perfect score, got into every med school they wanted. Then their dad said, "Hey, I want to retire from farming, and I'll give you the entire operation as long as your mom and I can live in the second house. I suggest you do the math." So yeah, they are a chicken farmer now. In Canada, chicken farming is printing money because of the quota system, and it's super easy as far as farming goes. They were straight up handed a massive operation that was already fully paid off. Story 5. We had a girl who was so musically talented, she got a free ride to Juilliard. She wound up not going to take care of her sick father, and within a few years was dead from an aggressive ovarian cancer. It's never easy to see young people die, but her fate just seemed so extra harsh. Answer. My friend was IMHO, the best musician in my school, and had a natural talent for all things musical. He went to university to study music. Then after the first year, he said, "My classmates are 5 times more talented than me. I'll never work as a musician, as long as that is the caliber of other students." So he switched to chemistry and got his doctorate and postdoc at MIT, then went off to work at the Los Alamos labs doing secret government stuff, despite being Canadian. The last time I saw him, he doesn't even play. He played violin anymore. Such a waste. I feel like Salieri and Amadeus angrily asking why someone with such musical talent just took it for granted. He didn't, but it seems such a pity. Story 6. This classmate went on to become a doctor, but tragically died in an accident that was caused by someone driving a chimerical truck who shouldn't have been granted a license. Very sad story. The driver went across 3 lanes of traffic and hit her SUV. She died a short time later. Story 7. He is the head civil engineer for a major city. Funny story about him. He was the ultimate troll before trolls were even a thing. He tricked most of the teachers into thinking he was barely literate. This went on for years and years. It wasn't until he took the ACT and SAT and blew them out of the water that the staff realized he had been fudged with them for nearly a decade. I miss that dude. He was fun to be around. Answer: at a parent-teacher night when my brother was in grade 10, his English teacher raved about my brother. My mom asked, "Doesn't his terrible grammar bother you?" The constant double negatives drive me crazy. His teacher said, "David would never use a double negative. He's only doing it at home to get under your skin." Once the little shoot was found out, he stopped. My parents thought his years-long commitment to the bit was hilarious. Story 8. I looked him up recently and found a series of postgraduate level physics lectures he taught about some sort of field theory. Apparently, after his postdoc fellowship at Gather, he is now a professor of theoretical physics. Was a chill dude, all things considered, but I'm not surprised that's where he ended up. Story 9. She took our high school quiz bowl team to nationals, got a perfect on her SATs, and was dating a guy 1 year younger than her. She graduated high school and went to a year of college about 2 hours away. Didn't like college and moved back to be with her boyfriend. They got married and worked service jobs that paid slightly above minimum wage. She kept exploring intellectual things, including computer programming. Wrote several games in Ubuntu just for fun. Her friend was in tech and convinced his employer to hire her as a junior developer. The employer was skeptical as she hadn't done a dev boot camp, worked in tech, or taken a single computer class. But in her early 30s, she started as a developer. Now, 15 years later, she is still a developer, making around $150K a year working from home. They never had kids and were used to living on a budget. So now her husband takes care of the house, does the cooking and cleaning, and they are living their best life. Story 10. I don't know beyond what I see on social media, but the top graduates of my class still seem very successful. One went into education, one in business consultancy, and another is a published author and continues to write. A couple of them are married, have children, traveling, running marathons, etc. Publicly, nothing big or dramatic or tragic, just leading humble and successful lives. I'm super happy for them. Story 11. She was the nicest and most accomplished, but shy girl. She knew she wouldn't get asked to the senior prom, so she asked a friend of mine, and he said yes. She went to Harvard, where during her very first semester, she contracted pneumonia and died. It was extremely sad. Very bad things sometimes happen to very good people. Story 12. He graduated in the top 1 of the state, landed a place to study medicine at the best university in the country. 2 years later, he dropped out of medicine, became a functional alcoholic and minor substances user. 2 years after that, he was shooting up heroin, and I stopped watching the slow-motion train wreck he became. Story 13. Went to medical school, then after graduating decided medicine was not for him, and he went back to school for computer science. He is now employed by a firm in NYC doing deep machine learning and crap like that. Also, we are related, so I get to hear how successful he is at every family gathering. Story 14. He became a chief technology officer, made millions, traveled the world, had 2 beautiful wives, 3 great kids. Then he came out to himself as gay at 56 and went manic and psychotic and almost eliminated himself before being diagnosed as bipolar 1. He lost everything. He was in psychosis for almost 2 years, bankrupt, divorce. He lives with a man now and was semi-homeless last year. This man is me. I was the smartest person in my high school, but maybe not so smart after all. Story 15. He got into Oxford or UCL, I couldn't remember. Unfortunately, other friends introduced him to substances, and he wasn't mentally able to cope with it. Around 2020, during the pandemic, he cut off contact from all his friends, and nobody has heard from him since. From what I heard right before the pandemic, he had already been struggling with his mental health. There's also a veil of secrecy around what happened to him, as my friends would try to contact his mother, and she would just block them. He was a funny and popular guy. We all had fond memories with him. One of the saddest things that a friend said about him was that I still see him in my dreams sometimes. Story 16. Grew up in a tough inner city, but she was high school valedictorian, graduating class of 400, went on to Harvard and became a research psychologist, and is a professor at Yale Creator and professor of the most popular class in Yale's history. Subject matter, the psychology of happiness. She is my cousin and was my best friend growing up. We do have an age difference. I was in middle school when she was studying at Harvard. On weekends, she would drive down to pick me up and let me hang out in her off-campus apartment in Cambridge so I could get out of the city. I was 12 using the computer labs at Harvard to print out pictures of Devon Sawa for my bedroom at home. Anyway, she isn't just the smartest person I know. She's quite literally one of the best people I have ever known. Edit to add, I just realized the question was asking the smartest person that you went to school with. Got excited to brag about my Kuzo and missed that part. Haha. Story 17. Define smartest. If you mean valedictorian, he ended up going to college, turned from a straight A student to a straight D student, dropped out, got married, then divorced, and I just laughed from that point because he was always a jerk to me specifically. Story 18. High school. Became a civil engineer, died of throat cancer. University. One is a doctor of philosophy at a fancy college. The other works in intelligence in some capacity. He's not really forthcoming, and we're not really close, but he's had an adventure. Story 19. Our valedictorian race was a tie between A and J. A wound up winning. She gave a copy and paste speech at graduation, including the often debunked, "We don't know how bees fly" line. She went to the most expensive private school in the state, got married, popped out some kids, and got caught up in MLMs. Jay got accepted to the big party school outside the state capitol, the one known for drinking, and within a semester drank himself out of all of his scholarships. My lazy jerk took a semester off, then went to the local community college to save money, where I bumped into him. I asked him what in the fudge he was doing there, and he said something along the lines of, life got in the way. He had cleaned up, found his version of Jesus, joined a church that went around the world to make other people find Jesus, met a gal during a missionary trip to Africa, and fell in love. A year or so later, he asked her to marry him, and they have a quick but holy wedding because her belly looked like she swallowed a bowling ball. At the hospital, she gave birth to a child with a drastically different skin tone than her or Jay. He walked right out of the hospital, deleted any trace of himself from social media, and no one knows what he's up to these days. Story 20. It's quite a sad story. She actually had a heart attack when she was about 16. She was overweight, but not massively by any means. So I think there were some genetic factors at play. But she took it as an opportunity to change, started exercising and eating well, and lost loads of weight, only to then have a seizure while driving at 21. She never had a seizure before or since, so this was completely unexpected. Thankfully, she didn't crash the car and made a full recovery, but what a horrible hand to be dealt at such a young age. She went to university but dropped out after a year due to a combination of ill health and just not liking the environment. As far as I know, though, she's now living very happily with her long-term partner, working as a tutor and author. She was born male and transitioned at a fairly young age, so I know she also advocates for trans issues and does talks on the subject. I haven't seen her in years, but she was one of the kindest, most easygoing people I've ever met who never let her struggles get her down. So I love to see her doing well. Answer. I wouldn't call that a sad story. It was an almost sad story, sure, but I'd say it's more of a rough story that's now smoothing out. Well, I say that, but given the current political atmosphere, if she's in the U.S., it might be getting rough again. It's the kind of story that ultimately leads into a happy ending. I don't know, as a not so young anymore trans person, seeing or hearing about a trans person living happy, normal, adult lives just brings me some joy, especially when people from their past talk about them as fondly and kindly as you have. I'm a lot better at playing the board game life than I am at play the real game of life. So these kind of stories really give me a sigh of relief, like telling that negative voice in my ears, okay, see, here's someone else that's living happily. There is still hope for me, so STFU. Seriously, I can only hope that my friends talk about me with the same fondness that you talk about her. Or at least will talk about me like that once I get back in the same and figure out how and where I'm going to pivot to next in life, LMAO. Story 21. Wanted to cure cancer. Did amazing in college. Went to work for the NIH after graduation to study cancer. Got into an MD-PhD program to study cancer biology and become an oncologist. Diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer. Had all the best healthcare and treatments possible. Went into remission. A few years later, the cancer came back with a vengeance and spread everywhere. Entered a clinical trial as a Hail Mary. Died from cancer 2 months after defending her PhD dissertation. Donated her body to science so her tumor cells could be used to treat someone else's cancer. And the other smartest person? Musical prodigy, extremely gifted scientist and mathematician. Taught himself to do VFX art completely on his own and became a micro-influencer. Got into substances in high school just to see what would happen, read, to not have to think about his family life. But none of us realized that at the time. Went to rehab, relapsed a few times but was 1,000 committed to sobriety, carried Narcan in case he could help someone else, oh ding. Met the love of his life last year, decided he was going to finally go to therapy so he could be the partner she deserved. Died of a substance overdose in July. Story 22. Classic Megamart kid. Never tried despite being in all IB like AP classes. Was always goofing off playing League of Legends. Somehow still was valedictorian. Everyone liked him, but he drove a few people insane because of how little he had to try. Anyways, he went to Duke for a year, planning to be a lawyer, before dropping out and pivoting to a different field. That was about 10 years ago. Right now, his LinkedIn says he works for Delta Airlines as an airline pilot. I've heard from a few mutual friends he still has a ton of extra time to pursue video games despite the job, LOL. Story 23. He is still brilliant, hard worker, cardiologist, family man, happily married, and one of the nicest people at my high school reunion. Appeared to remember every name, which is on par with what I remember. He had an incredible memory. So 3 things there: hard worker, incredible memory, and brilliant. Story 24. There were several really smart people in my high school class. One went on to get 2 PhDs in physics and is highly respected in his field. Another is a celebrated scientist and professor at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, where he follows in the footsteps of his father, who was also a famous professor there. Story 25. A month away from high school graduation, the top kid in our class, on his way to a very impressive university, went on spring break with his family. He wanted to see the sun rise on their 30-story balcony, but he needed to use a chair to get high enough to see it. Somehow he slipped off the chair and fell to his passing. Story 26. Majored in biomedical engineering, decided the medical industry was too icky in the U.S. to get involved in. So he majored in petroleum engineering after he completed his degree. Fudge up that the oil industry is less scummy than the medical industry in the U.S. Story 27. Retired from Google about 10 years ago at age 45, wealthy enough to have his own helicopter and plane. Another fella, a very popular streaming service. He retired at 45 too. He's not private plane rich, but he's 3 vacation homes rich. I was probably in the top 5 or 6 people for SAT scores out of 550 people, but I have not been as fortunate. I have done some cool stuff, and I used to be successful, but now I'm just kind of existing. Story 28. One of them married his high school sweetheart, and they now have a 5-month-old baby. The other one is a polyamorous, brilliant dude who went to do ayahuasca and is now a super enlightened civil engineer and is the kindest person I know and can do whatever he wants with all his money. We are all in our 30s now, BTW. Story 29. I hope this doesn't sound arrogant. I think most people agreed the smartest kid in school was either me or my best friend. We actually got quite competitive because we were running each other so close on every test score and constantly usurped each other as who had the best scores the school had. For me, though, he was clearly much smarter than me. Fast forward 20 years and he's a neurosurgeon. I regularly see photos of him traveling Europe. I had a breakdown in college from the weight of what turned out to be undiagnosed autism, coupled with pressure from that reputation. I was a genius who would be one of the ones that made it. I wasn't that smart. I was just good at remembering things, I'm told. And once college asked me to go out and learn for myself rather than just memorize a textbook, I collapsed inwards. In doing okay now, but firmly in the I make ends meet camp. I avoid anyone who knew me at school because they just keep telling me they thought I would have made it by now. And honestly, it's just too painful to think what could have been. I was right. It was my friend who was the smartest, though. Story 30. For me, the smartest person I went to school with was the stereotypical popular girl. Cheerleader, prom queen, and a bit boy crazy. We lived in a small town, so everyone assumed that she would stay in town, marry someone local, and work in real estate or nursing. That's what a lot of girls from my high school ended up doing. Instead, she ended up going to SMU, where she majored in finance and minored in French. After, she ended up getting her master's in finance from a top European business school, and now she's the director of finance at a major luxury brand. She was always nice in high school, so it's great to see her go beyond what was expected of her. Story 31. My HS valedictorian and salutatorian were separated by millimeters, both positively brilliant, near perfect SAT scores and perfect GPAs. I remember being genuinely excited to see what they'd become. These were people that could change the world when you are an 18-year-old. I was so excited to see them at our 10-year anniversary and see what they've done. He, the valedictorian, became a doctor like his mother and father. Sort of expected. He's done well for himself, although quietly hating it. She, the salutatorian, was a Mormon. Socially awkward in HS, but far and away the smarter of the two. She ended up at BYU, got married, then knocked up in her sophomore year and dropped out. She became a housewife. I remember feeling disappointed for her, like somehow her destiny and contribution to society was left untold. Then I realized that she was actually very happy and content with her lot in life. If only we could all be so fortunate. Story 32. Honestly, it's tough to pin it on just one. But a few in that elite group, I think most of them are off doing cool jobs with families. But the one you can't forget about OD'd on pills a couple of years after high school. I didn't really know him super well, but I was close friends with people that we were a smaller school. I think we graduated with like 250. Everyone knew each other for the most part. He was always a troubled dude. The other people I'm thinking of, I would consider kind of nerds, but he wasn't. Just a sociable, popular dude that was a good athlete and casually got a 35 on his ACT without really trying. He was great at everything he did, but he never seemed to like himself. Story 33. He died alone in an avalanche. Sometimes I still think of how scared he must have been. He was a good guy and was on a full-ride scholarship at Harvard. He was the type of guy that could have changed the world. He could have been or done anything he set his mind to. I miss you, Jimmy. Story 34. I was one of 6 uber nerds in our school. We were the science team, math team, ran the planetarium, looked and acted the nerd part. All of us were top 20 in the class. 1 went to Northwestern, became a journalist, 5X Jeopardy champ. 2 went to Cal Berkeley, does research on the human eye, grandmaster chess player. 3 went to UW-Madison, is an electrical engineer. 4 went to Tulane, died in a car accident in college. 5 went to UW-Madison, is now a professor of physics. 6 went to UCLA, is now a primary care physician. Story 35. He survived childhood cancer, went to NASA for an internship, graduated from college, and got a master's at Stanford, I think. He was on his way to a PhD before he died in a car crash in California. He was a passenger, not the driver. It's been 17 years since his passing and funeral. Story 36. Grew up in very hick rural Canada. She graduated high school at the age of 15 with a perfect 105.0 for all the weighted advanced classes. Soft, kind-hearted, into psychology. Unfortunately, no one knew she never applied to university. All of the bullying and being an outcast for being smart took its toll. Grandma found her in the bathtub with a kitchen knife. Nothing EMS could do considering it took 40 minutes for them to arrive. No one talks about it like the community erased her. Story 37. Went on a full ride to Caltech, got a degree in engineering. Early into his career, he decided to say fudge it and backpack around Europe, did a few workaways in Eastern Europe, and traveled for a while. Nowadays, he's living at a Buddhist monastery back in the U.S. He seems happy. Story 38. M from rural Arizona. Graduated high school with a Navajo girl who got into Harvard. Insanely smart and was going places. Had an awesome personality too, and people were rooting for her. She ended up getting pregnant by a 29-year-old deadbeat ex-military guy at 18. He didn't want her to go, so she didn't. Now she's a receptionist at a construction office, while her husband, same guy, is a pest control technician. Never left the town we grew up in, and she doesn't want to. I used to think of her as a sad story and a waste of potential, but she genuinely seems happy with the life that she has. Story 39. Finished his university tech degree, became a postman, motorbike postie, then joined the emergency services response unit when natural disasters occurred, then took his coding hobby and got employed by a government agency. Now can't tell me the stuff he's working on. Basically one of those people that are so smart they do whatever they want, and it isn't always just stereotypical smart people jobs. Story 40. She was valedictorian in high school and truly just so intelligent and picked up everything so quickly. She married some dude, bro, right out of high school. He was wearing one of those fake tuck shirts to their park wedding. Last I heard, they got divorced, and now she's a pediatric ICU RN. Story 41. He started partying with the jocks, got in a fight with his popular girlfriend at a bar, went to the car in winter to separate from the situation, was technically tipsy in a running vehicle to stay warm, had a popular dude try to pull him out of the vehicle claiming they were afraid he was going to drive tipsy, probably good call. Tipsy smart guy starts swinging, nearby cop sees commotion, intercepts, but gets struck by smart guy. Smart guy doesn't realize it's a cop and thinks he's being jumped, panics, gets in car, locks door, tries to pull the car out, hits the cop car, charged with assault on an officer, and impaired driving. I think more charges, but some got dropped and time was negotiated. Just like that, the genius valedictorian ended up in jail. Amazingly kind dude, though. Got through prison by drawing private pictures for prisoners. Is now a super successful tattoo artist. Crazy how hanging with the wrong crowd for a few months can change the entire trajectory of your life. I hope he's doing well. Story 42. We ended up attending the same university after high school. He was salutatorian, and I was ranked 76 out of 363. He graduated a year and a half earlier and has been nothing but supportive while I struggled my way through. Now that we're both out, we play Fortnite every weeknight and get to hang out in person every 2 to 3 weeks or so. Story 43. The second smartest became an architect, designing some really good stuff that the people with money wouldn't build, switched to finance, made a huge pile of money, had a house built from one of his designs that had been passed on, and lives in it. The smartest became a pediatrician, and she married the guy in the previous paragraph after they reconnected at our 10-year reunion. Story 44. Finished his PhD in physics and works at a community college as a professor. His spare time is spent at bars doing trivia. He's one of those people who can single-handedly beat teams of 20 people at bar trivia on his own because of his incredible memory and recall. Story 45. He was the smartest guy in high school. He was also gay. He does not want to do anything but so. Against his will, his parents and the teachers and the priest in school wanted him to have a very respectable profession. He was given a scholarship in prestigious college, so he took mathematics. Eventually, he had a doctor's degree in mathematics. He was recruited to work for the Army during Iraq War, calculating the trajectory of missiles. After the war, he was given British citizenship. He taught in college for a while, but not happy. He went back to sewing and became a rich fashion designer. Story 46. They became a flight attendant. It was my friend. She failed out of college BC. She wasn't stimulated enough and got bored complacent. Applied to the airlines, got hired not because she's a good interviewer. She hot. Her lack of people skills made the job rewarding for her. She feels challenged every day. Story 47. Passed away from cancer while in college on the path to law school. Not only was he exceedingly intelligent, but well-spoken and charismatic. I went to a high school that served a mixed community, middle class to low income. The school was underfunded but had passionate and caring teachers. In short, it wasn't a great school, but if you advocated and engaged, it could provide a great education and prepare you for college. Most students didn't go to college out of our school. This guy called out the bad teachers and tore them down with style and class. He could use their arguments and guide them into their own argumentative graves. I was one of those gifted students and have done well. Graduated third in my class. This guy was otherworldly and charismatic as hell on top, kind and pulled everyone up. Then he was taken from the world as the top 10 law school acceptance letters started rolling in. The world can be cruel and heartless and unfair, but it'd have us a brief time with JB. Miss you, JB. Story 48. Nice guy. If I had a sister, I would have told her to date him. 2 Ivy degrees, merited another Ivy graduate and a kid. Cruising through life, and I misjudged him. He became an addict to gambling and adult beverage. I read through his divorce papers. $50,000 in debt to Indian casinos, at least 10 prostitutes, multiple arrests for dope. Story 49. I was the smartest kid in class. Everything was going well for me. Listen to this instead. Something funny happened to one of my dumbest classmates. He graduated from school, didn't get into university, went into mandatory military service, and somehow got selected for free tuition at one of the most prestigious and very expensive law schools. And he became a successful lawyer. Story 50. Tie between 2 of them. Harvard, then sold her startup for millions at 20. Went to Cornell for law school after undergrad for fun. Bought a huge apartment in NY, does whatever she wants. Doesn't appear to work for a law firm or anything, just travels as far as Instagram shows. The other one went to MIT, became a literal rocket scientist, and did the classic nerd to hot girl makeover post-college. Got LASIK and Invisalign. Stopped brushing her curls out into a poof every day. Married a hot rocket scientist. Had what I imagine are hyper-intelligent babies. Seems extremely happy. I hope she went to some of the reunions. She was super poor and wore homemade clothes through high school, and they were so mean to her. She never gave any fudge. She focused 100 on studying, and I'll be darned if it didn't pay off. Story 51. It's me. I am them. Worked a dead-end job for half a decade. Got super depressed but sought therapy. Moved to the U.S. for a job in my field with cutting-edge robotics and automation. Thought working in my field of study would fix the depression, but instead it got worse. But working in an environmental field back in Canada and doing better now, at 30. Story 52. I knew this guy in high school who fit the classic smart Asian kid stereotype almost too perfectly. Straight A's, no sports, stacked schedule of academic clubs and extracurriculars. He was an only child with strict Gen X parents, and everyone at school knew it. His dad, who was always in business attire, would sometimes show up and scold him right in front of the school, probably a handful of times. His mom wasn't much different. Whenever she picked him up, he'd sit in the back seat like he was being chauffeured. Neither really saw her smile at her son or showed any emotion. She wore business clothes too, like they were both on their way to a board meeting. I remember once he had a band performance, and during his solo, his parents stood there watching with completely blank faces. No smile, no nod, no clapping afterward. It wasn't like they were rude. To other people, they were perfectly polite, but with him, it was like nothing he did was ever quite enough. By senior year, word got around that he was accepted into places like UC Berkeley and USC. Honestly, it made total sense. Had always been the type you'd expect to end up as an engineer, doctor, something along those high-achieving lines. After graduation, he disappeared from my radar. I wasn't really on social media, so I just assumed he went off and followed the path everyone assumed of him. Fast forward 7 or 8 years later, I'm in my mid-20s and walk into some tattoo shop I'd never been to. I am just trying to get a small piece done, and there he is. The kid I remembered from high school, except now he's covered in tattoos, full sleeves, ink up his neck, nose piercing, the whole deal. Turns out he's one of the artists there, and not just some random beginner, because when I looked him up, he had thousands of followers and was clearly doing well. The shop charged a ton per hour, 150, so he had to be making good income. It was pretty wild. This guy, who spent high school buried in physics and science textbooks, who everyone assumed was on a straight path to some prestigious, predictable career, ended up carving out a completely different life for himself. And honestly, he looked way happier than he ever did back then. Till this day, I wonder if he cut ties with his parents, or if they accepted his choices now that he's a grown jerk man. Story 53. Embarrassing high school reunion story. I was catching up with one of the smartest students and asked what she was doing. She said working at a doctor's office. I just assumed she was the doctor and offered my congratulations. She said, no, I'm the receptionist. Story 54. I've been waiting for this moment. Our school's highest graduating honor went to a guy who used his chemistry and math skills to start a roaring meth lab and distribution business on gang territory. They were then subject to a rather violent home invasion that resulted in the loss of one of his cook's fingers. He disappeared for 14 years and reappeared last year to message me on Facebook, offering the services of his new and improved plant substance hustle, and now he's back in jail. Such a waste of talent. Story 55. He went to Harvard, then medical school at Harvard, then got his MBA at Harvard. So when I Google him, he is listed as Joe Smith, MD, MBA. Obviously, his name isn't Joe Smith. He runs a major pharmaceutical now after selling a previous business for tens of millions. He probably makes more in a week than I make in a year. But hey, he's brilliant and has the credentials to back it up. Story 56. She is a life coach, and it's every single bit of MLM you could possibly envision. I realized something was way off when I couldn't decipher what the hell she's selling for $800 minimum. The endless buzzwords and bullet points on her 30 posts a day really bring it home for me. Story 57. It's the saddest thing. When I think all the way back to elementary school, the smartest person died of leukemia in 6th grade, then high school, the next smartest person died in a freakish single-car accident on the road. Late at night, however, the next smartest has apparently become a university professor. So I guess that's a success story. Story 58. Despite being ridiculously book smart, his true passion was music. He tried to start several bands, and the last one he even got a record deal through a contest. Sadly, one of his bandmates was a substances dealer, so they lost the contract. After that, he went into journalism and started a men's mental health organization. Really stand-up guy. Some from our old school say he partied too hard, his intelligence on music and not going into science, etc. But I think that he did the right thing in following his dreams and doing what he wants, not following others' plans for what he might do. Story 59. We were best friends in elementary school. He came from a supportive household that was brick and mortar. I lived in a trailer on cinder blocks with my grandma. The teachers separated him from other students to keep him from being distracted. He received extra help from teachers and staff. It was definitely noticeable. He got extra tutoring and attention. I remember I scored higher than him on the FCAT, and he accused me of cheating. I remember his attitude towards everyone changed, like he was better than us. Intellectually, he was. Emotionally, he was a bully. He graduated with a 4.0, I did with a 3.6. He went to Harvard and is a CEO now. I'm an expat and travel for work. Story 60. In high school, we had a guy get perfect 36 on the ACT, all kinds of free rides, accepted to some Ivies, disappeared instead, went to see what he could do on his own. This was before social media, so no easy way to find out what was up to. Decades later, I'm at SeaWorld, and wouldn't you know, there's Mr. Smart Kid feeding baby dolphins. I got his attention, started catching up, trying not to sound judgmental. I more or less said, we all thought you were going to end up a doctor or lawyer. He smiled and said, I'm just happy to be serving a youthful purpose. Story 61. A relative never cracked open a book, but would get near perfect scores on exams. I watched this kid grow up, and at 5, he'd been reading books on how nuclear reactors worked. He'd even been IQ tested, and basically he was a gifted child. I remember thinking about what this kid could do with his life. His options were honestly pretty limitless. Overpraising led to a hugely inflated ego, with extremely lax and irresponsible parents screwed him up so badly. Never made friends because of how incredibly smart he thought he was, and how incredibly stupid he made others feel. Did really badly for his O-levels. Dude really thought he'd ace everything without ever studying. Dropped out of tertiary education once locally, bummed around until the adults in the family cornered him about making plans. He was given a chance and money to study in the UK and come home with a degree. Mucked around for a year, complained about everything. Pretended to be expectant about results when the prick failed to submit his final report, which meant an instant fail. Partied too hard about 50K for that year of schooling, lodging, and food. Came home subsequently, and it's been a year now. He's still bumming around. No job, no plans, nada. The responsible elders in his life, who'd spent years tutoring him, trying to guide him and counsel him, all gave up one by one. He even had scammed his grandmother of $10,000 saying he needed to pay for something school-related. Kid took the money and went to Selfridges. He said he had trouble banking it in, so he spent it instead. It was wild just listening to everything he put the family through. Story 62. Our valedictorian ended up being a pedo and got shot by some girls, parents trying to run. He's in jail now, and hopefully he rots there. Our salutatorian unfortunately got into a wreck with a tipsy driver. He's now paralyzed from the waist down as well as his left arm and has brain damage and constant memory loss. Our salutatorian runner-up is a math teacher, and she just gave birth to my godchild. Story 63. He went to Stanford, then made shoot-ton of money at a hedge fund as a quant in NYC, but got out of that game intentionally and went to an Ivy League law school, and he does his own thing. He stayed grounded and active with old friends, found a lovely wife, and has some kids. He probably has investments for life where he doesn't have to work, but he does a lot of business consulting, legal advice during mass. He's 41. We don't talk about money much. He was one of those kids who might have been bullied, but his older brother, who was also wicked smart, kind of looked out for him and made sure he was social. Hell, he was probably more popular and well-liked than most of us by the end of school. I think his secret sauce is intentionality. He has goals and plans on how to hit them. He never dated in school, but was fine talking to girls. He had an exit strategy and a plan for what to do regarding his finances and career. He's also just a happy person to be around. I should give him a call this weekend. Story 64. I was the smartest in my grade. Before starting senior year, my mom passed away after cancer complications. My family didn't do anything to help me, and I was forced to move cities. My father was my caretaker, but he already had many other kids and wasn't interested in helping me emotionally. He also resented me for not going to college and become a doctor like him. I was completely depressed and in very poor health. One day I decided to stop crying and go back to my hometown, enroll in college, and fend for myself. Flash forward, I am now an ophthalmology technician. Life is difficult, but I'm happy to be alive. My dad remains a narcissistic old man, but I forgive him. Story 65. She's teaching science at our old middle school. We all expected her to become a scientist or engineer or physician, like most of us, but she decided to go back to school and teach science where she learned to love it as well. In her case, it genuinely was a calling. She is an amazing person, and I'm glad she can pass on the love of learning to a new generation. Her twin, who is also extremely bright, is an economist now. Story 66. He got graped in an initiation to a frat at college, dropped out, became a substances addict, and I transported him to the hospital on several overdoses, paramedic. Eventually, his body was found at the edge of the lake one morning, and there was nothing we could do. Story 67. I think it's somewhat subjective when you're looking at the top 10 or so in a class BC. It comes down to decimal places in GPA. In that top 10, which includes me, there are doctors, lawyers, execs, and an actuary, me, LOL. I think all of us could collectively be called the smartest. Of course, there are also those talented in other areas or just not good students. Story 68. He made a drone with a pistol mounted and controlled remotely, got on the news and arrested. Then he was like, spying on people with a drone and arrested again. And then I didn't hear much after that. Possibly gone into military for drone stuff, but who knows? Story 69. He was like 3 years advanced. He was so smart. He was literally younger than everyone in the grade because of his sheer brilliance and needing to advance grade levels. Got top score. His doctor parents wanted him to go into medicine. Went into community theater. Story 70. I am that person. I went to a military-type school, though. Class president, which is like valedictorian. I was the very top rank of all students responsible for them in many ways, as well as gained an actual military college scholarship, which is only granted to one out of the school. The idea was I would be a helicopter pilot in the Army, pushed by my father Beast. Of course wanted to be in the military like him at the time. TBC, I never served any real military, as I broke away from everything when I turned 18, ran away. I'm a 32-year-old degenerate skateboarder. I've seen homelessness and I've lived a dream beach life with supercars, been through the typical substance addiction. But now I'm just skater only general FK off, just kind of PPL. But this is the life I wanted. Story 71. Committed tragic end. Dude could go one semester with straight A's and the next would be all C's just because the depression hit him especially hard. Dude could break down just about any subject into parts. Explain it to anybody. Told me he had done essentially that to the concept of tragic end, broken it down, analyzed it, decided it wasn't worth it. Worst part was that he told me that even after concluded that tragic end wasn't pragmatic, it did nothing to stop him from wanting to die. As you can imagine, he was in and out of the psych ward. He even explained his own tragic end ideations to me in the context of some psychological theory he had studied, explained that he could recognize that he felt like he didn't belong, and that he knew that that was one of the most significant symptoms. Worst part was that I felt like I couldn't do a darn thing about it. He had thought through it so much more than I had. Some people say they wish they could have done more, but I just wish I could have done anything. Story 72. Two people in my year were insanely smart for a school with a 60 graduation rate. One went to MIT when his parents didn't go to college and he got in with a full ride and board. The other went to CMU, but his entire family went there. Funny enough, guy who went to MIT wouldn't stop talking about how smart he was and was a huge bragger. CMU guy was super humble and got into every school he wanted to. I only found out he got accepted because I asked him where he's going and where he applied. Story 73. This is going to sound immodest as hell, but I think it was me, actually. My teachers really liked me and said I could do anything I wanted to, but I struggled a lot emotionally and with motivation and never really applied myself. I basically just showed up and it was enough to do exceptionally well. I started studying physics at university, but my mental health got so bad in my first year. I felt completely isolated socially, and my dad got diagnosed with pancreatic cancer that year. I ended up failing out of school and went traveling for the summer. Met a Polish girl and then went to live in Poland and teach English for a couple years. My dad died while I was living there, and I ended up going into a terrible spiral of addiction to adult beverage and plant substance, but thankfully I met a very good psychotherapist there who spoke English well, and he helped me a lot, but my GF and I ended up breaking up and I moved back to Canada. Got a job in a warehouse at first, and then found one in pharmaceutical production, but I found it boring as fudge, and it really jaded me and made me dislike working for companies, honestly. I want to get a job in the public sector or do something entrepreneurial. Anyway, I continued to struggle for years, and I would basically just show up for work, go home, and drink and smoke until I pass out, then wake up and repeat ad nauseum. About a year ago, I realized I was probably going to end up in an early grave just like my dad, and I needed to do something. I got back into therapy and found a psychiatrist who would prescribe me Vyvanse for ADHD. I had been asking for it for like 10 years, but every doctor I talked to either said stimulants won't help you or you can't take this stuff because of addiction. You need to be sober first. My new doc told me that's complete bullshit, and he understands why I have a hard time putting faith in doctors. Haha. I quit my shoot job because I asked them for 2 weeks vacation to visit my long-distance GF, and they said no 4 times, so I just stopped showing up LMAO. I'm back at uni doing my physics degree again, and it's going well, although I'm still struggling with the substance use. But if you asked me last year if I thought this amount of progress would be possible in a year, I would have said no way. It's a long grind, but you just got to keep things moving in the right direction. Story 74. Ours became an actual rocket scientist, worked on a lot of projects for different companies, and then his wife left him, and now he's apparently a shut-in and doesn't go anywhere and doesn't go outside. Great guy. I grew up with him. Hope he shakes off the funk he's in. Story 75. I went to a smart school, but this kid was next level. Maths whiz, was already enrolled at university in year 7, age 13, while he did high school with us bozos. Went on to Harvard, published a small number of papers with incomprehensible titles. The last evidence I can find of him is from 2010. Don't know where he is now, but he was a really nice kid, and I hope he is happy. Story 76. He brought a dictionary to our outdoor education camping trip in 5th grade. He wore a plaid suit in 8th grade. Lost contact with him after elementary school. 12 years ago, he appeared on Reddit doing an I am as the chief troll hunter of Newegg Uli Cheng. Story 77. She passed away at 21 from a rare bile duct cancer. She was my best friend. She came home during a break from college with jaundice, and they thought it was anything but terminal cancer. She received a posthumous degree, and her high school class ring went up into space to honor her. She had a full ride in an aerospace program. The smartest guy at our school got busted at his Ivy League for dealing plant substance. Story 78. We had 4 genuine geniuses in my year, magnet-type school. One's a financial big shot, one's a corporate lawyer, and 2 are MD specialists. All good, decent people, too, which is nice. The thing that made the difference compared to other smart people in our year is they all had successful professional parents that pushed them. None of them ever had money worries or the option of slacking off. But more importantly, by the time they were young teens, they had all 4 absorbed a sense of mission from their parents. All of them were heavy in clubs activities, sports, student government, etc. too. That's another thing that I always think about. They were never just focused on academics. Story 79. He went to Princeton, graduated cum laude, was admitted into a prestigious MD-PhD program, got his girl pregnant, and became a pathologist instead of a researcher. 5 kids, including one who went to West Point and got on College Jeopardy. I, meanwhile, was a wayward piece of shoot, and he doesn't take my calls anymore. Who could argue? Story 80. I know a guy from our music high school who was one, if not the most talented violinist I've ever saw. Went on to play as the first violin solo violinist for our city's symphonic orchestra for a couple of years before dropping his music career entirely to open a coffee shop in my neighborhood. Cool dude, and I'm happy for him, but it's a shame he lost his love for music as he was an incredible violinist. Story 81. I had a guy in my class in mid-school whose lowest score was like an 810, and he was disappointed. In fact, the whole class was because everyone, including teachers, always expected him to score higher. I checked his LinkedIn, and he's now a risk specialist at a major bank. He must make good money, I suppose. Story 82. High school, that would be me. I'm a technical fellow at Microsoft. University, one of the students in my class blew me away. She could derive mathematical rules from first principles in the exam if she forgot to study. She is a professor and has a huge list of publications. Story 83. He was a year younger than all of us because he had skipped a grade. He was our valedictorian. He got a full ride to Georgia Tech where he founded an aerospace startup called Hermeus as an undergrad with a few buddies. They raised $200 million in funding and won a few USAF contracts. He became the youngest CEO in the aerospace industry at 28. They're building the world's fastest plane, Mach 6. We're all very proud of him. One of the nicest and most humble guys I know. Love you, AJ. Story 84. The smartest guy in high school, our valedictorian, ended up a homeless druggie, and it's a sad story, ruined 2 different families and completely ghosted 3 children. The smartest guy in university I lived with a couple years, graduated in physics, and works on robots for Toyota. He married a woman with children, one of them with special needs, and took care of them like his own. One of the most humble guys I know. Story 85. Went to the best law school in the country for undergrad, got a master's in law from arguably the best uni in the world, Oxford Law, and got a highly coveted legal position in London. I, on the other hand, gave 2 attempts for GMAT, business school, got 415 out of 805 in the first attempt and 495 in the second attempt, and scheduled a third attempt, which is in 19 days, where if I don't get at least 645, contemplating ending it all. Some are born with it, and some just aren't. You gotta make peace with it and do what you can, I guess. Edit, we are 25 of Story 86. Did less than 1 semester at Harvard on her full ride, realized she was gay, dropped out and started working at her girlfriend, now wife's, bagel shop. Growing up, I honestly felt bad for her. Both parents were professors. She was their only child and prodigy at that. She had no social life outside of the approved after-school clubs that were all geared towards getting her into a top-rated school. She was a sweet, awkward girl who carried too much pressure and was robbed of her childhood. While it's crazy to think she dropped out of Harvard and forfeited a full freaking ride scholarship, I'm happy that she chose her own path in life. Story 87. My genius, slightly autistic best friend is so far beyond my intelligence, it's wild. He moved to Puerto Rico, makes millions of dollars trading in the electricity market, and has a wife and kid now. My man is eliminated. I'm going out to visit him next year. Story 88. I retired from the military, got a few college degrees, retired again. Officially at 49 this time. I am now 61. I drove past my high school a decade ago. It's changed so much. Every now and then I'll see a former classmate's name pop up. Incredibly enough, the people we expected to do well, they did. No one expected me to do well when I joined the military, but to get promoted, I needed college education points. So I took classes. Turns out I liked college much more than high school. Story 89. Bob was easily the smartest kid in my elementary school. He was always messing around with radio equipment and taking things apart. I full expected him to end up doing great things in science or teaching. His mother listened to the fire department calls and would take him to active fires. He ended up a fireman. Story 90. Crashed hard after school because they couldn't work well with other people and was too much of a jerk to step into a leadership position. They spent their life being told how gifted they were, that they would treat others like shoot. They then committed tragic end after being fired, but not before burning bridges with everyone in the area. Engineers are apparently a tight-knit group. I'm friends with the dude's sister. Sad for his family, but he truly was an entitled jerk. Story 91. Two I know. One turned to be a chasing whatever type of person, seemingly still searching for the purpose of life in the 30s. Other is an alcoholic sick of his life and everything around it. It is not the best. But consider how many comments mentioning tragic end. I think it's not the worst outcome. Story 92. There were a couple of guys that were probably the smartest, if you go by grades and test scores. One is an engineer for IBM, the other is a doctor. But the actual smartest guy ended up working for the CIA, doing shifty financial stuff in South America, which didn't surprise anybody that was friends with him. The guy was an expert in everything, even in high school. Story 93. Smartest kid in my school was this quiet guy who always finished every test before everyone else and somehow still got full marks. Everyone swore he'd end up a doctor or building rockets or something. He went to uni, completely burned out in the first year, and dropped out. Moved up back home, worked in a supermarket for a bit, and disappeared off the radar. Now he's fine, just living a normal life. Office job, decent money, gym, girlfriend, nothing crazy or genius level, just normal. It made me realize being the smartest in school means nothing once real life starts. Real life drains people in a different way. Story 94. I don't know who was really the smartest person in my class, but we had 7 people graduate from high school with a perfect 4.0, so there's a good chance it was one of them. Probably the most interesting answer was a guy I had known since elementary school. He ended up going to Stanford with the plan to study engineering, then ended up changing his major to history after he got there. Last I heard, he was working as a youth pastor at a church somewhere. I also heard his dad was pretty disappointed, which I've always thought was pretty rich, since his dad didn't even work and just let his mom, who was an attorney, pay for everything while he sat on his jerk at home. Story 95. Had a mental break after his PhD thesis was refused twice. Full-on Facebook post rant, left the school, ended up not getting an official master's or PD. I think he technically had a master's but never got it certified or something. Last I saw, he was experimenting with hallucinogenics and swears that if he tried DMT, it would give him the answers he needed to complete his PhD. Sad. He was working towards a PhD in theoretical astrophysics. Story 96. This is an interesting question because most of us probably didn't know who the smartest people we went to school with was. I can only tell you about the people who I thought were smartest. Maybe you or I was someone's smartest. Depending on which school, we have a laid-off chief scientist with a beautiful family, a cybersecurity specialist with an MD and a loving spouse, and a research chemist I lost touch with who could be anywhere. Several runners-up include a young tragic end victim in the computer sciences, a religious scholar, we lost one, and a stay-at-home mom Jill of all trades. I'd say about half of them had serious mental health challenges, and a third had to deal with abuse. Story 97. Has a burnt-out game dev with 3 little kiddos. But enough about me. The second smartest, by all appearances at the time, became a school teacher, messaged some nasty shoot to a kid, went to prison for 6 years, and thinks he's going to add me on LinkedIn like he's not a fudge pedo? Hell nah. Story 98. This guy was genuinely a genius growing up. I looked at him a few years ago, and he is in a Misty from Pokemon cosplay with his hairy belly sticking out in a skirt, wearing a furry-type tail and wig. Apparently, he is into humiliation and posts photos of himself in female cosplay and eats up the negative comments. The female got into DDLG in college and posts DDLG play on TikTok where she drinks out of literal baby bottles and wears diapers. She doesn't work since daddy, boyfriend 20 years older than her, takes care of her. Maybe it was something in the water around here. Story 99. She graduated high school with honor roll, high honor roll, special recognition from the university, all the things. The last time I saw her was a couple of years after graduating from university. She'd gone into nursing but dropped out, then did a few months tree planting with a boyfriend, and went back to university for environmental sciences of some kind. Then she dropped out of that too and moved back in with her parents. At the point I saw her, she'd been living at home for 6 or 8 months and was battling depression with no plans for school or a job. She spent about 3 hours over drinks venting about everything that had gone wrong for her. I felt I couldn't say anything about my own life, as it would seem like rubbing it in. I felt terrible as we'd been best friends at one point, and she was always the overachiever. Meeting up with her was probably 10 years ago now. We've lost touch since, but I've heard she's doing better. Story 100. He was a good friend up until I got in the wrong crowd in high school. He ended up going to an Ivy League university and getting a PhD in astrophysics and cosmology. He studied voids in space and has many published papers. He also worked at CERN. He's now back home after investing a shoot ton into Bitcoin and cashing out. He launched a YouTube channel that failed about his faith in investing. Super weird. Story 101. I wouldn't say smartest, but the person who got the best grade score died a few days after graduation in an accident. In hindsight, I'd say not the smartest, because that took a lot of effort and time spent studying with no actually payoff in the end. Life partied too hard, studying not living. Story 102. Went on a full ride to our state college, did 3 majors, 2 degrees, in undergrad in 3 years, completed his master's in his 4th year. He works in pharmaceutical research now, bought a house at 25, and got married to a great woman we went to high school with. He's always picking up new skills and has to keep busy with little projects. He's still one of my closest friends, and he's absolutely the definition of a lifetime learner. Story 103. Ill answer for my schools, valedictorian and salutatorian, because the difference came down to an A in gym instead of an A. One works in software engineering in the military-industrial complex. The other went into finance. Both are doing fine and we're pretty down-to-earth people. Hope they're doing well today, though. Like many of you, I only know their status thanks to LinkedIn. That said, I think the smartest guy is a buddy of mine that cared more about learning than perfection. He spent a lot of time in high school studying ahead and doing well enough in class to skip grades in some subjects, specifically math. He went to college with Calc 1 and 2, multivariable, proofs, linear algebra, and ProbStat done on the county's dime. Had a couple Gen EDs done as well. Didn't get a 4.0 since some of the classes were tough on him. Now he's a PhD candidate studying n-dimensional D-frequency domain systems from a graph theory point of view. He's figured out some wacky new method to automatically separate a target from the background in a video from frame to frame. Story 104. I feel like there's a difference between the smartest person you went to school with and the person who got the best grades. The smartest kid I knew in high school got the worst grades but was a computer wizard and now works for JPL. But if you asked anyone who the smartest kid was, his name wouldn't even be close to the top. Story 105. I had a buddy who jumped 2 classes in school because of his IQ, and during his time in college studying computer science, he decided it is all too much. Jumped from a 130-foot bridge into an active industrial train yard. That was almost 10 years ago now. Nobody had any clue on why. He was not visibly struggling, had no financial problems or anything health-related that anybody of us knew of. To this day, nobody knows why he did it. Answer: I obviously didn't know the guy, but if I had to guess, I'd say that severe burnout making it feel impossible to live up to the internal standards he had set himself and which he felt were a fundamental part of who he was may have played a role. I've met a lot of people who have really struggled with that and experienced it myself to some extent. But whatever his reasoning was, I'm very sorry you lost him, especially in such a traumatic way. Story 106. I was one of 3, the smartest lives in our state, got multiple advanced degrees, married a rich guy, and they retired early. She has never worked. The other person did the normal undergrad and works for some company in the UK. Myself, I joined the army. Spent time pointing loaded weapons at other human beings. Came off active. Got an undergrad in design and have spent 25 years as a designer, developer, and marketer for the same company. I suppose we all did fine by normative standards. None of us are some elite wonders. Probably partied too hard some of our smarts because we didn't have a desire to be like gold-hoarding dragons or workaholics. Have enough to live and be happy. Story 107. The smartest kids in my middle school both dropped out of university. She worked dead-end jobs for a while, but eventually joined the Navy and went back to school to become a medic. She's married and has a beautiful family. The last I heard from him, he was working in a bookshop. Story 108. Schizophrenia. My class's mild-mannered and brilliant high school valedictorian dropped out of medical school, was convicted of domestic abuse, moved across the country to CA, was unhoused for years, and we learned that he took his life a few years ago. Saddest story I've ever seen unfold. Story 109. Was my best friend all during high school, even after he had to move away. We weren't Ivy League bound, but both did exceptionally well for shoot life circumstances. Dude was a fudge genius and didn't even have to try. We both made 33s on our ACTs. I got into a cozy 4-year college and got halfway through grad before a better opportunity came up, and that's what I do now. He came out as gay to his parents' senior year and became instantly homeless. He took his own life. I didn't learn about it until 4 years later. I was a Bible Belt child, so I had no clue he was into me until reflecting on it years later. Story 110. She's now 30, raising her 2 beautiful kids with her soon-to-be husband, doing university admissions and advising. Something along those lines, at least. I never understood it too much, but she seems to be doing well, and that's all that matters. She was the smartest in the school, and I was one of the lowest educationally. Funny that we'd end up best friends still 13 years later. Story 111. Harvard-educated lawyer, attached himself to a lunatic, ultra-hardline MAGA politician who you definitely know, for reasons nobody who has ever once met him understands, before being shit-canned and spiraling out in spectacular fashion. He's now facing disbarment, and his career is torched. We weren't really friends, and I haven't talked to the guy in 24 years. And also, massive Our Leopards ate my face life choice, but darn. Story 112. The 4 smartest people in my class were all girls. As women now in their 40s, they are 1. Biochemistry professor. 2. Works for a university in donor relations. 3. Registered nurse who uses her knowledge of multiple languages daily. 4. Pastor at a big church. 3 out of 4 ain't bad. Story 113. That would be me. I was the valedictorian, 4.0 GPA, scholarship for music to a 4-year private college. Got burned out my senior year and dropped out. Went back 6 years later for nursing, got my bachelor's, and now work critical care, ICU NICU, and pick up at a long-term care skilled nursing facility. Took me a while, but I got there eventually. Expecting 17 and 18-year-olds to know what to do with their lives with very little life experience is wild. And the reason I'm not pushing my current 17-year-old to figure it all out yet like my parents did to me, because all it got me was a significant amount of student loan debt and years of depression, thinking I was a complete failure for growing to dislike my field of study. Story 114. Executed. In a service drive to a cell tower or something similar, he and some other dude were going to commit life insurance fraud where my friend would fake his passing, the other guy get the money, then split it. Other guy liked the plan, except for the split it part, and had already taken out the life insurance policy on my friend. He shot my friend on his knees in the back of his head. He could have done anything in life. Anything. He chose theft and fraud. Story 115. Define smartest. The academic achievers are all in high-level overachiever jobs like me. But I've come to think the average blue-collar students, like the guys in my hunt club that have non-traditional, non-Monday to Friday jobs and can spend copious time in the woods in deer season, have it figured out a little better than me and my wage slave self. Story 116. He didn't have the benefit of an advanced class like kid today have. Didn't do college after high school. Changed jobs about every 5 years or so. Finally earned a bachelor's degree in education, but is now in his 5th year as a substitute teacher and spends probably too much time on Reddit. Story 117. 2 guys. 1 is now in private equity, graduated with PhD from MIT. 2 is now a professor at Columbia, math. Both actually went to some poker tournament in Europe when they were 17 or 18, different years, and came back with more than €1 million in winning. They made the local newspaper. Oh, they went to Europe because here in Canada, 18 was too young to legally gamble. Edit to update age. Story 118. First, define smart. You mean academically as in straight A in class? Or smart with money or investing? Smartest person academically is now a doctor. Smartest person financially retired after selling all the bitcoins. Another married young and is a stay-at-home mom, living it up with $10,000 allowance per month. Couple others joined the military, now smoking pot all day for PTSD. Others are joining their parents or family business and are doing well for themselves. Story 119. I went and got expelled in 8th grade, so I went to one continuation school next to my former middle school and went to the next one early as you had to be 16 to go, but I was allowed at 15 because my birthday was in February. Anyway, the smartest kid in my high school, continuation school next to the actual town high school, he looked like a shorter comic book guy like from The Simpsons, except he wore those Velcro strap sandals, you know, the ones some hikers wear. He went to Harvard as I read about it in our local town paper. Good for him, I occasionally would wave hi so people thought I was cool with him. Story 120. We had a couple of people, a set of very techie twins ended up in Japan teaching English for a couple years. They were talked into doing some translation for fantasy adult movies that didn't make sense, but names were in the credits. Another brainiac ended up flunking out because he had to manage his own schedule without parents and bought his first computer. He never left his room. He did eventually graduate and is probably fine. The year after a talented girl auditioned for a symphony and made it. Last I saw, she's had some acting roles. Nothing huge. Most smart or popular kids ended up on their jerk. Those that were doing okay or bare minimum in school really came alive after high school and did very well. The couple HS reunions were very interesting. Story 121. Graduated with a 5.0, was just the most incredible information sponge I had ever met. Super socially awkward and didn't complete any superlatives, so got denied from most places. Ended up doing comp sci at the state university and probably makes like 80K working for the GOAT. Story 122. I was in the Smart Kids Club in high school. One went on to run his family business. He was born wealthy, is still wealthy, and has a beautiful-looking family. Another who easily could have been a mathematician turned spiritual, and he runs a church now, also with a beautiful family. The rest of us became engineers, and we're doing okay. High middle to middle class. None of us are struggling, but also none of us are still married or have children. I'd like to remarry and have kids, but I'm just not sure it's in the cards. It's hard to trust the process after my partner of 10 years left me, and I'm still not sure what I did wrong. She fell out of love and didn't want to work on it, and I worry that can happen to anyone. Story 123. I don't know what happened to the smartest people I went to school with, but a couple of my friends and I got them elected prom king and queen. I did that to annoy the most athletic guy I went to school with who was in the running for prom king. I later learned from another friend, the most athletic guy lost his college scholarship due to being caught with plant substance while attending a technical school. It has been 20 years since then, so I highly doubt any of them remember me. Story 124. I'm from a very rural farm town. Our class was 26 and had co-valedictorians. We were also one of the largest graduating classes in quite a while. Before us was 17, after us was 14, so 26 was huge at the time. We had some ridiculously smart people for as